this unit is trying to get people to do is to sort of focus on the other elements, the context surrounding when somebody's like writing or reading something. So it's trying to be like, all right, so you're trying to look at all of the elements that are influencing or impacting a person while they are trying to engage in this type of whatever type of literacy it is, reading or writing or whatever. So the first thing she says is, as an example, something as basic as writing down the bare facts of your life is never done in a vacuum, meaning there's like purpose and form and all of these elements, right? So you might be writing down the facts of your life in order to do a CV or a resume. You might be writing in a diary. You might be writing an autobiography, right? So all of those things are different sort of forms, even though it's all about you, right? It's all about the same thing, the bare facts of here's your life, but these are all different forms. And so what I think this unit's really driving at is trying to get at those elements of like how we change ourselves in order to fit different forms and do different things. That's the most basic part of it. So she gives these examples, right? So the bare facts of your life, they could be a CV, a diary, autobiography. They could be something that's written by someone else, like a medical case person could be writing notes about you. So those would be facts that are also about you, but obviously written by someone else and in a certain situation. So it's a lot about context. Giving as a speech at a funeral or in a reported in a police statement. So it's trying to get us to look at like right outside of the literacy event. Like what are the elements that are influencing all of the interaction, like how you write it, how you what you say, what you include, what you leave out, and so on. And we're calling this literacy as situated social practice, which basically just means that the learning that goes on, or the literacy in our cases goes on, is influenced by the environment, by things that are going on around us, and by what we're supposed to be doing, what our goal is for whatever the task is, and so on. So we're just trying to, so it's basically trying to like focus on this event, this literacy event, from this other perspective of thinking about what are the forces that exist that are sort of causing people to read or write in a certain way. What did I write here? This means that literacy, a form of learning, is not a simple set of acquired skills, but the process of making ourselves aware of the elements in any given situation that influence or impact the writing process. So it wants us to start to sort of expand our thinking about what literacy is, right? It's not just like, okay, we learned how to read and write and that's it, and now we all have skills of reading and writing and we're done. The fact is, when you sit down to write something, there are many other things involved. Your own personal thoughts, where you are, what you're writing about, you know, when it's the assignment is due, is it late, you know what I mean? Like there's other conditions that exist. So and they want us to be aware of those and try to think about how those might influence. I think this whole unit here is really just trying to get us to expand our thinking about our own writing and reading and start to acknowledge and think about the other elements that, you know, play a factor in what we are writing and how we are reading and what we are understanding and so on. Okay, and this is where the metaphor of an ecosystem comes in, right? So this person uses this metaphor of an ecosystem, which is how human activity interacts with the environment. So you are in this environment and you're writing or reading, but you're part of this ecosystem because you are in a certain place at a certain time with certain conditions around whatever it is you're writing or reading. And sort of focusing on those or understanding those in theory it leads us to a better sort of deeper literacy, like, right, a more comprehensive understanding as opposed to just very surface understanding. I think that's the idea. So these examples are like, here are examples of specialized situations of writing or reading, right? So in a business or organization, they develop ways of keeping records or reporting on production and processes. So this is part of that. So it's it has a function and there's a reason to do it, and so on. So that's its own little ecosystem itself, like the business world. Like you wouldn't just be like, I'm just going to read novels now, I guess, because I'm at work, because that doesn't really work. So even though reading novels is a form of reading, it's not really appropriate or worthwhile or allowed or whatever, like in a business situation. So it's just trying to get to think about all the different ways that, reading and writing, the different situations that they can be applied in. Does that make some sense? All right, so the social practice approach encourages consideration of how literacy works within the social ecosystem of which is part. So that's what we were just talking about. So literacy, the concept of literacy, the reading and writing of literacy, functions differently in different ecosystems. You're in a law office, you're in a break room, you're in a business meeting, you're in a team meeting for creating advertisements. Like there's all these different situations, right? And literacy exists, but it changes, right? It shifts and changes according to whatever the outside surrounding context, what the demands are. And obviously the people who are successful are able to actually, adapt very well to that, right? Like I know I'm in an advertising meeting, and so all of my energy and my writing and my reading skills are being, used to achieve this goal, right? Whatever, sell some product to somebody in some creative way or whatever. Okay, so we get the concept of it, I guess. I mean, okay, so let me just read what I wrote and see if this. So we're trying to practice focusing on analyzing and discussing the other elements that impact the development of different kinds of literacy, different forms of reading and writing. So our focus is on, so at work, there are demands on you. That's one of the things that is influencing you, right? There are expectations at work, there are demands at work that you do something in a certain way by a certain time. So that's one of the elements that's informing your literacy at that moment, because you have to get something done and you have to do it in a certain way or whatever. And so it's trying to examine, that's a very obvious one. Because, well, I mean, I guess school has that also, which is also what I'm interested in, right? School's like, hey, read this and write this essay about this thing after you read this thing. Okay, so that type of literacy has a bunch of expectations too, and it has to do with wanting to get a grade or wanting to learn, or like it has a bunch of different things around it that are influencing sort of how you read or write something. All right, so we are trying to practice focusing. Okay, yeah. To do this, we look to the clues within a piece of writing to try to understand what helped to shape the writing. What elements were involved in the production of this particular piece of writing? Okay, so this part of it is us finding something that's already written, and looking at and trying to decode it sort of to try to figure out what are some of the elements that are at play here, right? So did this person write this for an assignment? And then you're sort of like looking at what they wrote about. So what's influencing, their desire to understand technology sort of pushed them to do this one thing. So you're trying to look at the forces that are at play in a situation. We also practice shifting our focus to noticing and taking into account the elements that impact our process of reading. So again, to really sort of simplify it, you're looking at those elements that are sort of surrounding the literacy process, whether it's reading or writing, and how they affect you. Okay, so this whole social practice thing about literacy, the situated social practice, it's trying to emphasize that any teaching and learning activity should take place with the following things in mind. So these are some of descriptions of the elements that might be at play, that might be influencing us. What people do with text rather than focusing simply on the text themselves. Literacy events or moments where a text is used in practice, for example, how people help one another accomplish written tasks, such as writing a letter, filling in a form. So like, right, so it's trying to get at this idea that, okay, I'm gonna sit here, I gotta fill out this form, and I'm doing it, and then I'm like, yeah, I don't understand this. I'm gonna go like ask my son, like, because he might know something about. It wants us to think about those things, which is weird, right? Because usually it's, you know, we're just writing an essay and that's it. But it wants us to think about the different processing elements that we do when we engage in literacy. So it's not just that we sit down, we know exactly what we're doing, and we like just churn it out. That never happens. We think about things. We ask people. We have different, you know, family and life situations that also impact us. Like trying to just think about those and how they might influence us. I guess that's sort of the goal of it. Thinking about so this is all about different ways of thinking about these forces. So for example, how reading and writing are embedded in everyday activities, in absolutely everything, right? So how they're embedded in weddings, in doing karaoke, in finding your way around a strange town. So it's, you know, so reading and writing are involved, and they're not just essays, right? Reading and writing in life, there's many episodes where we're doing them for totally different purposes, for totally different goals, in totally different situations, and being aware of that. I guess that's sort of what this whole exercise is trying to get us to do. Another awareness angle is how literacy is changing. We talked a little bit about this, such as computer-based assessment or sending emails rather than postcards, shopping online, blogging. So that's another awareness. And we actually did talk about this in the last unit, right? We talked sort of a lot about the changing technologies. And that's one of the ways you do this. You sort of are paying attention to the fact that, oh, okay. And I was trying to get people to do that a little bit, being like, how did this change the way I thought or the way I perceive things? Like I no longer really need to worry about spelling if I text, apparently. I can use faces and little emojis. That's changing the way I express myself, which I've never done before, whatever. But anyway, so that's one of the things to think about when we're thinking sort of about outside of the box or outside of just the regular literacy. Next one is, okay, the diversity of different languages, scripts, cultural conventions, and modalities, written codes, image symbols used in reading and writing. So that's another thing, sort of another aspect outside of the way we think about just reading and writing that we can pay attention to that inform us, right? They inform what we think, how we react, what we're going to say. Different literacy activities may also require different physical and cognitive skills, like such as using a pen and paper would be one thing, or typing with a digital keyboard, reading Braille, painting a sign. So this is more like a form, right? Writing can take a bunch of different forms. And reading and writing. So I'm reading a graphic novel versus reading a poem. I'm reading in English or I'm reading in Chinese. Like these are things that are affecting this our literacy, at that moment, that ecosystem that we happen to be in. Don't go away. The existence of funds of knowledge that reside in communities and individuals. So these are like specialized areas, right? That have sort of how we can talk about many of them. But these can be valued, drawn on, and shared in literacy learning, such as childcare specialists. So there's a certain literacy, reading and writing, that is involved in the world of health, of childcare. There's a certain literacy in reading and writing that is involved in specialist health knowledge world, raising plants for food. So anything, any major, task or community, I guess is what they're thinking of knowledge that requires knowledge has its own sort of literacy ecosystem. You learn, your reading and writing adapts itself to whatever the thing, childcare, right? So